presentation is from Nieri Rachele, and is dealing with the semiochemicals, semiophysicals, and their integration for the development of innovative multimodal systems for agricultural pests monitoring and control. So the floor to Rachele.
Hi everyone, can you hear me? Do you hear me well?
Yes.
Okay,
yes,
I'm gonna set a timer. I'm gonna start it so to make your work a little bit easier. So first of all, hi to everyone, and I would like to start my talk with a small introduction and a thought about why I'm talking about agriculture to ecologists in an ecoacoustic congress. Well, my consideration starts from the fact that we all know global population is on the rise. We are getting every year more and more, and so the food demand is increasing as well. And this increased food demand requests for more food, but also to protect biodiversity. Likely, our governments and also the social public, it's always more aware of the importance to protect biodiversity. And so to find strategies that are alternative to the conventional agriculture to make it more sustainable. In this framework, the integrated pest management is an approach that is holistic in the sense that takes multiple aspects to control pests, either insects, weeds, or disease, in a less impacting way to the environment. And this is the reason why we also need to, as biologists and ecologists, to be aware of the need of the agricultural world to help find new solutions. Among the alternative strategies to what is the conventional agriculture, I think for the social public in general, most of the attention is on the use of pesticide in agriculture. This is because of a lot of outreach work that has been done, starting from Rachel Carson, as also Gianni was mentioning this morning, with Silent Spring, the book, but also other activity like some comics that have been made. So the public is aware that chemicals are not the only solutions, and they should be used only when they're actually needed. The other alternatives can be behavioral control, cultural control, or biological control. And today I'm gonna focus especially on behavioral control. So what do we know and what it is, behavior manipulation? In nature, behavior manipulation occurs quite often. It can happen by mimicking a signal or by eavesdropping a signal. In the picture, you see a very classic example of behavior manipulation of a cuckoo bird in the nest of the host species, the parasitized species, and the parent that it's providing the food for this bird that it's not its own offspring. Well, as humans, we can do a similar things using signals that are not our own signals, but are signals of a pest species to try to disrupt their communication. And in the figure here, you see just a graphic representation of what is making disruption with pheromones. So basically, when the pheromone of a species, usually moths or Lepidoptera in general, is applied in the field to mask the pheromones produced by the females of the species. And in this way, the males cannot find the female anymore and the matings decrease. The story of pheromone mating disruption is quite long. It starts from the beginning of the history of insect chemical communication. But mainly during the 60s, so when we were able to demonstrate that insects use chemicals to communicate, and we were able to synthesize artificially in a lab these chemicals, Harry Shorey, who is considered the father of the modern methane disruption techniques, conceived the idea of using these molecules in agriculture at our own advantage. And since then, the rise of pheromone methane disruption has been huge. Here you see two graphs in comparison. There is here the number of molecules that have been registered to be used in agriculture to control pests. And on the other side is the quantity of insecticide treatments that have been applied. This refers to a specific region in Italy where methane disruption with pheromones have been used extensively for grapevine moths. And as you can see, more or less, when the number of molecules increased, so in the 90s, it's also in the same years that the number of insecticide treatments decreased, because farmers had an alternative to chemicals. And so they had an alternative to spray pesticide, and instead they started to use these dispensers of pheromones in the field. And the attention of the public was so much focused, and maybe not only the general public, but also the scientific community was so focused on the chemical communication of insects and pests that a specific terminology developed. So they coined the word semiochemicals, the term semiochemicals, to indicate all the molecules that may affect the behavior of receivers. And together with semiochemicals goes the most famous name, pheromones and allomones, cyanomones, so an entire world of terminology. But we know very well that animals in general, and so as well insects, they use also other stimuli to communicate, not just chemicals. And in particular, I'm thinking about physical stimuli, and here it comes in the game sounds, but also colors, lights, and substrate-borne vibrations. All these stimuli have been used and can be used to scare, for example, a crow from a crop, from an orchard with loudspeaker, or colored sticky traps can be used to attract some pests, or even lights. So here the difference between colors and lights. So active lights can, like UV lights, can attract mosquitoes and then can be killed, or ultrasounds can scare off undesired animals. And let me just make a small parenthesis here on what is biotremology, because I try to highlight when I was listing all the different physical stimuli that can be used, together with sounds, also substrate-borne vibration. And I try to stress this difference because maybe not everybody today was also attending the talk of yesterday of Valerio Mazzoni. But substrate-borne vibrations behave differently from sounds. So we are always talking about sounds, about vibrations, but there is the need to distinguish the two disciplines because bioacoustics studies the mechanical communication by acoustic waves with their proper physical features, and biotremology, the study of surface-borne vibration. These vibrations are usually a mix of surface vibration and longitudinal vibrations, waves, so they're quite different from the physical perspective. But when we go and we analyze, so when we record, when we have already the file recorded, these systems and the methods can be very similar with bioacoustics, and this is the reason why I'm here today talking to you, and more importantly, listening to all your talk to try to learn the more that I can. So behavior manipulation, to go back to my main topic of the talk today, can be done with all these different physical stimuli. as it has been done with chemical stimuli. We can attract or repel insect pests, we can promote or inhibit their behavior, and we can disrupt also their behavior, like in the mating disruption technique. And another point that has been maybe overlooked in the pest management over the years is the fact that animals and insects, of course, they communicate in a multimodal way. So usually they do not rely just on one kind of stimuli, on one communication channel, but they use multiple communication channels together. And this also enables them to overcome, for example, a background noise in general. And here you can see two examples of this application. One is for the sting bugs. Maybe some of you had this problem because it's a worldwide problem now, the brown marmorated sting bugs that is invading crops, but also houses, or flies in the field. The trap that can be used, they are combining different stimuli. In the case of the sting bugs, since they rely on chemical and vibrational communication, the trap has both this aspect. In the case of the flies, they have chemicals and colors to attract them inside the trap. And probably the most innovative of the two traps is the one for the sting bugs, because it's not already available for buying it. Is the vibrational trap that is combining pheromones and vibrations. It's a trap that has been developed in the institution where I'm working now in Trento at the Fondazione Edmund Mack, in collaboration with the CBC group industry. And the idea is exactly that, to exploit the multimodal communication of the species. And as you can see in the graph, the number of adults that has been trapped is much higher when there is together the vibration and the pheromone, respect to the pheromones alone. At another level, the integration of semiochemicals and semiophysical must be done also at the ecological and ecosystem level. So even when one species can be controlled just with one physical stimuli or chemical stimuli, in the ecosystem there are multiple species at the same time, and often the farmers need to control them simultaneously. Also because using chemicals for one of these species will overcome all the efforts to use alternative to pesticide for the other species. And so then farmers decide to use pesticide for all of them because it's cheaper and easier at that point. So if we want to really get rid of pesticide, we need to find alternatives for all the actors in the ecosystem. In this example, in a vineyard, what we can do is to use chemicals, for example, for moths and mealybugs, colors for mealybugs and thrips, and for leaf hoppers and plant toppers, a new technology that we have been developing in the last 10 years now, that is the vibrational mating disruption. How this works? Well, leaf hoppers, they rely mainly on vibrational communication to communicate. And usually a pair, a male and a female, establish a duet of surface-borne vibration that is maintained until copula occur. And the reason why the duet is maintained is because the male need to perceive and detect the female signal to be able to locate the female. What happens when there is a rival male in the same situation is that the rival male in the figure, the green male, start emitting a masking signal, a disturbance noise that masks the female signals, and so disable the blue male to find the female. It stops the duet. And in this case, the rival male can start interacting with the female, establish its own duet with the female, and mate with the female. This is what we decided to use in an agricultural perspective. So we replaced the green male with a shaker, with a transducer that is applied to the trellis system. And so it's able to play back in all the row of the vineyard and in all the plants, the disturbance noise of the species, and to mask the mating communication of the species and to disrupt their mating. We got very good results in semi-field tests, so we decided to go in 2017 in a open field test. Now we have several vineyards in Trentino that have this system going on. The first that you see here in the picture was cabled because we needed to have power energy in all the vineyard to be able to transmit the vibrations to all the plants. The newer vineyards, they have solar panels, so we are trying to be more self-sustained also from the power perspective. And the system is controlling together Scaphoideus titanus and Empoas cavitis, so two species at a time who communicate through substrate-borne vibration, because we implemented the disturbance noise of the first species to be able to mask also the frequency range of the mating signals of the second species. And this in the picture is one of the transducer that is installed on one of the pole of the row, and it's transmitting the vibration to the plants. So this just to say that I just showed you some of the application of biotremology and physical stimuli in pest management. There are several more projects going on in our institution, but also, and more importantly, in the rest of the world, in Japan, in the USA, in New Zealand. And all in vineyard ecosystem, agriculture ecosystem, but also in forest, so in wild ecosystems, natural ecosystem. What is missing? What are my perspectives? Well, this discipline is in its infancy and application as well. So what we lack is a clear understanding of the behavior to be able to target several species, but also trying to understand the mode of action in a more clearer way and in a more deeper way. And this is probably the most important part for this Congress, and I would like to open a call for collaboration about this, because we still need to assess what is the impact on the ecosystem. We are here introducing a disturbance noise, a very strong noise, because we know that it's target on the frequency of the communication of this species. What is happening to all the other species that are not target? This is something that needs to be addressed. And then, of course, the product development and commercialization that cannot be left on its own, but must be followed cautiously. So I would like to thank everyone, especially the institution where I'm working and the partnership for this project. And I would like to take any question if there is time. I hope I wasn't too long.
No, it's perfect. We actually have 2 minutes, but we can have time for a discussion. Thank you, Rachele, for keeping the time. And thank you for your wonderful presentation. Let me see if there are, I'm enthusiastic of what you just presented, just as a comment. I mean, instead of, I was completely unaware of this field of biotremology applied to the to the crops, and instead of killing insects, we could disrupt them to be right on the crop that we need, of course, right on the plants that we need. And this is so important. And I'm commenting if maybe, I'm sure in bioacoustics, there are a lot of studies that are applied to the use of sound to have a sustainable crop plantations. I mean, this is so important. The transition. Imagine a partial transition of chemical, of the massive chemical usage that kill everything. Many insects. I mean, those chemicals are not species oriented, not all of them, and we eat in the final chain, we eat the chemicals. Imagine to use intelligently the tremology and also the sound, the ultrasounds. I mean, there's plenty of work. There's a lot of work to do there in order to make the transition in agriculture that is going to be needed very soon. Yes. So there's an entire field that opens up also for us acousticians, and so absolutely. I stop my comment and I open the floor to the question and answers. I don't see any question, but I would like to push for questions from the panelists and from the attendees. Sorry, I don't see the standard view here. No hands raised. Please, even if it's not just an ecoacoustic.
Yeah, I think it's
presentation.
It's more of an introduction of the word, because we are missing ecoacousticians here, because exactly. There is the need, there is the ask for us to find alternatives, but the side effects can be crucial and must be taken into account, because otherwise we are going to be not worse than chemicals, but we're not going to solve the issue. So there are several aspects that has to be taken into account, and I encourage the audience here to think about it.
For example, the population control over the crops using sound.
Yes.
So you can test the biotremology, your vibration, your shakers, when they are on, you can test what happens to the other species, for example, in order to be more species oriented with your action. So it's very interesting and it's very important within the ecological transition. So Almo, please.
I have a question. I have just a consideration about the paper of Rachele. I think that ecoacoustic should be working like an umbrella discipline also for biotremology, let's say, called like this. Not to be aggressive and incorporate new field, but because the effect that are in excuse me, there is an helicopter that is flying strong on my home. So, I think that there are animals that use vibration for very life traits, and other that use sound. But there is a strict relationship between these two types of animals, because some animals are predators. Soniferous species are predators of non-soniferous species, but the non-soniferous species can use vibration for communication. So it's the same semiosphere in which we have different strategies, but the process is more or less the same, and the modality are the same. So I invite all people to consider that the vibroscape is the originator of every behavioral effects and transformation of such a vibroscape in a sonoscape, and then with interpretation in a soundscape. And so we have a chain that is initiated in a vibroscape, and vibroscape is depends by English speaking, so I use as well. What do you think about this idea that we have to think that originally we have a vibroscape, and then there are some evolutive mechanisms that have transformed using cognition with vibration thanks to her organs in mental in a mental process that we recognize like sound.
Yes, I thank you, Almo, for these thoughts, because are, I think, very on the point. I think the study of substrate-borne vibration and sounds must go hand in hand, because it's there are a lot of things that goes together. As you said, probably they originated as vibroscape, and then they developed and evolved into mechanoreceptor specialized in sounds detection, for example. But and also it's important to notice that all substrate-borne vibrations, at least in a certain percentage, are transferred to the air as sounds, and on the reverse. So sounds, once they eat a substrate, a tree, they create reverberation, which is important for acousticians for the sounds, but they're also originating substrate-borne vibration in the trunk. And in the trunk, probably there is an entire ecosystem of organisms that live and detect those vibrations. So it's very important, I think, that we are putting together the two worlds, and we try to collaborate and find what are the interconnection and what is affecting what and what is changing what.
Yeah, definitively. I use a metaphor. It's the same subject that changes dresses according to the day, and we are exactly in the same condition. That vibroscape is a unique and is a subject, and then is shaped differently according to different strategy, different dresses. Okay, it's a metaphor. Yes.
Yes. Well, definitely, we could say that sound waves originate by vibrating surfaces and objects. So it's the same. It's two faces of the same coin. Yeah. So yes, definitely this semantic and semiotic is appropriate. So thank you, Rachele, and
thank you,
and thank you, Almo, for your intervention as well. There is another question in the chat, but you can maybe respond and copy all panelists and all attendees, so that
yes.
okay. So, and we go forward with the program.